Was it intentional to have the three bald guys side by side? Because I'm starting to feel like it is.
Hey, it's Will Crockett here from Discover Mirrorless. Thanks for joining us on another one of our hybrid hangouts. Got a great topic here today. We're going to talk about RAW versus JPEG. Not so much versus. It's RAW or JPEG. Those are powerful tools, and each one of them has their place. They can be used properly, and they can be used kind of improperly, too. So we've got a great panel here of pro folks and semi-pro folks to help us out making the decision on when we're going to set our cameras to JPEG, when we're going to use RAW. On the far left, that is Carol Schlintz from Milwaukee. Say hi, Carol.
Hi, Will.
Good to see you. In the two slot there, that is my buddy G, the G-Man down in Miami from Small Camera, Big Picture. I mess that up every time, don't I?
You do.
I do. And in the center there, that is the world famous Wait, Jared? Can I do my impression of you? Do an impression?
If you would like.
I do. It's FroKnowsPhoto.com. You have no idea how long I've been waiting to do that. Welcome, Jared Polin.
Thanks for having me.
It's great having you here. Next, in her first hybrid hangout, it is Marlene, the imagemaven.com. Hi, Marlene.
Hey, Will. How's it going?
Oh, it's great. Good to see you. Good to see you.
You too.
And of course, next one over, that's going to be me. Hello, I'm Will Crockett, commercial photographer based out of Chicago. And on the far end there, that is Bill Burkholter. We're in North Carolina, right?
I'm in Charlotte, Will.
It's great having you here. Carol, fill me in. How often do you use JPEG, and how often do you use RAW when you're photographing your families, babies, kids, indoors, outdoors?
Portraits are 100% RAW, and when I do my favorite sport, which is water show ski, I'm probably 85% RAW and the rest JPEG.
In portraits, you're RAW only. Why is that?
Because I don't like the color that I get from the JPEGs out of my camera, and until I can get out of JPEG color what it should be, that doesn't need a tweak or it needs a tiny tweak and then it looks good, I'm going to stay with RAW.
Good for you. Good for you. Giulio, I know that you shoot a lot of editorial gigs, some advertising gigs. What you just shot some rap star or something last week, didn't you?
Flowrider, yeah.
Flowrider. When do you go from JPEG to RAW or JPEG plus RAW? What do you like to do?
For paid assignments, I'm always going to shoot RAW at this time. But a lot of times I'll mix it up. I'll add RAW plus JPEG. If we're in like a real hurry and we got to give some files to the art director so they can just do a layout, we'll do JPEG. And a lot of times the art directors are happy with the JPEGs, then they just keep the JPEGs. Are you comfortable enough getting a JPEG out of your camera that can go right to a client? Yeah, when I was using the Fuji X Pro 1, I actually shot a job. It was all in JPEG. Well, I shot a JPEG and RAW, but the JPEGs were good enough and the client was happy.
Good for you. Jared, you're known for being a RAW proponent. Do you have your I Shoot RAW shirt on?
We got the gold one on today.
Oh, wow, special edition. Very nice. Do you ever shoot JPEG right out of the camera, or are you just RAW only, Jared?
It's locked in RAW. There is no such thing as JPEG on my camera, honestly.
Really, you don't shoot RAW plus JPEG either?
No, when I first got my first digital SLR, Nikon D2H, we're looking at what, 2003, 2004, and nobody out there had information on which was better, RAW or JPEG. The understanding back then was nobody knew a lot about it because RAW was pretty new for what we were doing. Yeah. So I made the decision then that if they give me this option, I'm going to shoot it. So they gave me RAW plus JPEG, so I did that for a while. Then I realized that, well, I don't even touch these JPEGs. There's no reason to have them. And so ever since, it's been RAW. And my camera, first time I pick up any camera, the first thing I do is put it into RAW, and it never comes out of RAW because I don't want it to ever be in JPEG.
Cool. Marlene, you are a RAW shooter, but I know you do shoot some JPEG too, right?
I would say 99% RAW.
Might as well go for that extra percent while you're at it.
Only when I'm using my mother's camera that doesn't shoot RAW files. You know, her little point and shoot when she hands it to me at the family parties. I'm kind of like Jared. I got to say that I did shoot RAW plus JPEG for a little while, and then I read this white paper that Adobe put out about all the levels of information in JPEG versus RAW and the 12-bit files and stuff like that. And I was convinced. Plus, I find it's faster to process my raw files because I was never really good at curves and levels, and it didn't really make sense to me. And I just love just the sliders. And I also use, for color, I use a Weibel card so that I get one-click neutral. Neutral isn't always what I want, but it's a good starting point, and especially for studio portraits, which I do a lot of corporate things, and they're not super creative. The light has to be good. They're used in all sorts of materials. Mm-hmm. So I just love the fast simplicity of editing the raw files. I'm more of a slower paced shooter. I don't shoot a large volume of images, and if I'm shooting client works, it's a lot of times, portrait-y, corporate-y, headshot-y, environmental things, and I'm into lighting, and I like to carefully put lighting together. So for me, I enjoy actually the challenge of shooting a JPEG. So I shoot probably 85 to 90% JPEG, and the rest would be RAW. When I'm going to travel around and do a lot of camera testing for the manufacturers, believe it or not, they ask that we would shoot in JPEG. And that's one of the reasons that they hire me to go test their cameras, is because they want to make sure that there's no flavor imparted into the data that I'm recording by the RAW processor, unless, of course, the manufacturer happens to have their own RAW processor. But give you, for instance, like the Fuji X Pro has so many different handles on that RAW file that there is no raw converter software that will do all the things that the X Pro needs to do. But I go either way. I'm super comfy with Lightroom, and it doesn't really matter to me, whatever's the right tool for the job. But I do work a lot with the volume lab folks, and that's part of my job too. I work with companies that shoot kids sports, and of course the military does not accept raw files. They have to shoot JPEG.
They really don't let them shoot raw? And is that something that Pete Souza, is he shooting JPEG? I mean, I thought when I spied on his computer during the President's Photographer, it had the CR2 there. I could see it on the screen.
They will allow them on their own personal time and their own personal computer to process raw files. And when you get higher up into what they call the combat camera section of the U.S. military, they do allow you to pick your camera, your lens, for instance, and allow you to veer off a little bit. But their whole goal in the military is to fill up a database, and they won't take a raw file into that database. It's becomes what's the matter?
I don't get it. I would think that they would want the quality that you pull out of, to go back in 30 years, like archival things. Everything. Sorry to take over or do this, but you look back at, we're now archiving things, or everything's been archived in the past, and you want it to save it for the future, and a raw file is unedited, it's uncompressed, and a JPEG is cooked, and you would think that they would want the archival nature of it for the future of everybody to have.
Yeah, I think it all boils down to cost of not only storing that larger file, but if they had to retrieve it in the future, that means that they would have to have somebody that would know how to do that. The military has a different way of looking at things, of course, but one other element in that whole JPEG thing is, you did mention it, that the JPEG is cooked, and it does have an element of including the photographer's signature or the look, and it's kind of finalized. So if the photographer wants it to be black and white, a black and white JPEG is maybe a little more final. Maybe that's what the photographer wants.
But you look back at a lot of the film time, and we know that a lot of the styles of photographers aren't just taking the picture. Part of the battle is shooting, and then the next part of it is your processing. And to me, to try to use the 3-inch screen on a camera to try to fine-tune what you're trying to do with every single picture, I just think that a lot of your style is going to come from how you process your raw files.
I've worked for some of the largest photography companies in the world, though. I'll put it that way. In fact, the largest portrait company on earth. And I can tell you, having worked for 3 of them, 2 in the digital world, and 1 of which I actually set up in the digital world in the early 2000s, that we shot nothing but JPEGs. We never shot raw unless we were totally uncertain of the light, and we were also totally going to try to use the JPEG because we shot raw plus JPEG. We would occasionally rescue an image by processing a raw file just because we were in a situation where we needed the latitude. But when you're in a high volume business, when you do millions of portraits in a 13-week window in the fall, you can't afford to process raw files into JPEGs. The real key is to nail your settings at the camera and to nail your exposure at the camera. There are tools that enable you to do that, and they're so good that we rarely had to even touch the files in the lab when the photographer did it right. Now, that's a big caveat: when the photographer did it right. It's really easy to get in the weeds if you don't know what you're doing, but if you know what you're doing, you can nail it.
That's right. It's a lot of responsibility. Jared, chip in there, bud.
Yeah, no, that makes absolute sense. The fact that you guys are shooting millions and millions of pictures of students and all that, and you have to get it right right there. I mean, those pictures, I don't know how well they live on. You know, a lot of it is you get your print packages and you get them to people and you deliver it. Now, you should be getting it right every time there. I mean, the lighting should be right. You should have the right color temperature and all of that stuff. If you have the people shooting it and holding out the string to the nose properly, you know, the proper distance.
At least a light meter, Jared. Come on, no strings. We find out that a lot of companies who want to do kids' sports portraits or graduations or school ID or other types of ID pictures, corporate ID pictures even, that they don't want to have their photographers even dip their toe into RAW because they think it breeds sloppiness. They say that there are so many photographers that will go get a camera and they'll put it onto an automated mode and won't pay attention to exposure values, contrast values, white balance values, and then rely on RAW to fix it later, that it slows everything down. And if they were to put that little bit of extra attention in their bill to make their exposures closer to correct and white balance closer to correct, it would be much easier for the RAW file to process as well.
Now, when you're shooting or you're selling, you're doing money-making activities.
Yeah.
When you're processing RAW files into JPEGs, that's something that has an opportunity cost to it, and I don't think you want to do that very often.
Something to be said, though, about getting it right in camera, you know?
Yeah, Giulio, do you ever play with any of the JPEG functions in the camera to create in the camera? Like, for instance, when you want to shoot JPEG, do you put it in, or sorry, you want to shoot black and white, do you put it into a black and white mode and then create JPEG that way? You ever work that way?
Yeah, when I'm shooting for myself, I'm shooting for fun. I don't want to come home and go to work the second time. So I'm just going to leave it in JPEG. I mean, if I'm out with my friends, we're at getting dinner or at a show or something, I don't want to come home and sit through RAWs. I just want to shoot it and get it right, maybe shoot it wirelessly to my iPhone or something and be done with it.
And you're happy with the quality, the difference in quality? Obviously, there's a difference in quality between JPEG and RAW, but
well, of course. But where are people looking at it? They're looking at it on their iPhone or the web. If it's pictures of me and my wife and we're having dinner, do I need to shoot that RAW and go home and treat it and color correct? No, I don't want to mess with that. If that's a tool that you need to take your vision and make it a reality, then cool. But a lot of times for me, I just don't want to mess with the post, and I just want to get it right and deliver it, and that's what works for me.
Yeah, me too. Jared, go ahead. You had a comment there?
Oh, I was observing the background there, and I love the snow cone machine, the Snoopy snow cone machine. I had one of those in like 1984, and it was the coolest thing. It doesn't really work too well, but I love that snow cone maker in the background.
Yeah, I've not made one yet. That was a gift, but I may do that this weekend.
Hey, Carol, is the process of transforming a RAW file into the JPEG that you're going to send off to the lab to be printed, for instance, is that part of your creative process, and is that a process that you enjoy, or is it drudgery?
It's neither. It's just, I would put my JPEGs into Lightroom anyway, because that's my catalog and my sorting mechanism. I don't do jobs that go straight to the internet or straight to the client. It's okay.
So you're going to take your Lumix GH2 in RAW, and then you're going to bring it into Lightroom 4, right?
Yep.
Okay.
And then I'm going to color correct it, because I'm taking a color checker passport picture at the beginning.
Good for you. So
I'm going to color correct the entire shoot, unless I, really radically changed my lighting, and then I'm going to take another picture with the passport in it. But I'm just going to color correct the whole thing. Then I'm going to pick the ones I like the best, the ones that are the most awesome, and gather them into a group. And then it's just a matter of, do I need to do anything further before I present to the client? Mm-hmm. In the case of the baby, no, not so much. In the case of my high school seniors, some of them, yes, rather a lot. Mm-hmm.
The Smart smarter photographer is looking to grow as an image maker, constantly improving their imaging process. Sees every phone, frame, tablet, and computer screen as a great place to put pictures. Still a little nervous about all this video stuff, but it's okay, we'll help you. The Smarter Photographer is a new video series presented by 22 super talented photographers and 2 that are maybe not so talented. Oh, and my dog. The Smarter Photographer is focus on the smarter ways of shooting, shaping, showing, sharing, and even selling your photo, video, and audio files through the web. Prints, phones, Facebook, iPads, computer screens, and much more as we move into the hybrid imaging era. The Smarter Photographer is on DVD or stream to any screen at any time. Each volume covers the latest, greatest ideas and simple solutions in photography. Volume 1 features fresh info on choosing and using online gallery systems instead of plain old websites. Lynette top 10 reasons why we should probably all be using Lightroom 4. Photographer Giulio Sciorio shares the imaging secrets in the Hybrid Hot Seat segment. Should you be thinking about replacing your DSLR with a mirrorless camera? We'll introduce you to our recent results on using LED lighting instead of flash for event photography, and plenty more. The Smarter Photographer is the future photography is hybrid, less fuss and more fun. On that line, I chit-chatted with Jared a little bit on the phone last night. I told him about one of my little aha moments, and that was when I was in Death Valley and I was testing a couple of mirrorless cameras, and I had my DSLR gear with me too. And I realized all of a sudden that part of my creative process was embedded into the JPEG. And I know this sounds really weird, but just follow with me. And you know the prints that I refer to a lot of times in our videos here that are behind me. I'm big into inkjet printing, and all these, the ones that happen to be up here now, were shot on JPEG. And in fact, I'm like Jared. I like to crop in the camera. So for me, one of the aha moments.
Can I interrupt you real quick?
Go ahead, buddy.
We gotta take that term back, that crop in the camera thing. We have to reinvent it. I mean, back when my teacher said crop in the camera, not in the darkroom, we physically meant crop in, do it, get it right, but now there's crop options in the camera. We don't mean literally go into the crop option and crop it. We're composing it, right? Yeah. Right.
Great point. Thank you, man. When I say crop in the camera, that doesn't mean I'm going to shoot it in the full frame and then later crop it in the camera before I get it out of the camera.
Yeah.
What I like to do in order to fit my crazy vision, my little peanut of a brain is, if you notice, I like to shoot in square a lot, and I like to shoot in 16:9 frame horizontal. I skip the 4:3 frame a lot. So what I'll do is I'll take a mirrorless camera with electronic viewfinder and I'll set it to shoot in square, so that when I'm composing and choosing which lens I'm going to use, I'm looking through the finder, and not only am I seeing square, but when you look at like some of these images that are sepia toned back here, I will put the camera in JPEG mode in a sepia tone, adjust that sepia the way I want to, and then when I'm looking through that finder, when I'm in the desert, I'm seeing a square sepia tone image, and that's part of my creative tool. Now, there are other photographer friends of mine that say, oh, Will, I would rather shoot that in RAW, and then I've got lots more control on my computer in sepia tone, and I hear you. It doesn't matter to me. For me, I hate sitting in front of the computer processing files. So, like Giulio, if I can skip that, I will. And even though there are some sacrifices with shooting the JPEG versus the RAW, for me, I got to tell you, it's a little bit of a challenge, too. I like to go to Death Valley and be able to shoot just JPEG. It's kind of a thrill for me to slow everything down and make sure that I do get it right in the camera. Giulio, you ever do that?
What's that, get it right in camera?
Non-wise guy. Did you ever just slow yourself down and shoot JPEG on purpose when you maybe should be shooting RAW? Yeah,
actually, every weekend now I'm actually shooting only JPEG. I just want to test myself and see how much detail and what kind of files I can truly get out of JPEG without just dismissing it and saying, well, RAW is superior to JPEG, which in some ways it is, but in some ways JPEG is superior to RAW. So as a creative person, I want to be able to have another option to create and not just limit myself. So that's what I've been doing on the weekend, is shooting just strictly JPEG and video.
That's well put, because there is a time that you're better off shooting JPEG, and there is a time that you are, in my opinion, better off shooting RAW files. So, Jared, when you shoot video files, of course, you probably don't want to do any color correction on video files. How do you set up your camera? Do you use like auto white balance and stuff when you shoot video?
Yeah, with the video, I actually leave that in auto white balance, but I do go into the picture control and set up that saturation the way I want it, because we know that we're not shooting raw video, and I think most people forget this, that when you're shooting video, it's taking the settings from your from the picture control. So that's where I work on the sharpening. That's where I work on having that. I actually set my picture control for my raw file, not for my raw files, but I noticed a long time ago, I think it was with the D2H, and I would shoot and everything was neutral, and even though I was shooting raw, I would think that the photos weren't tack sharp. And to me, tack sharp's really important. But then I realized that what was going on is that there was no correction being put on to the preview image in the camera.
Right.
And so what I've done for preview images is I pumped up the sharpening just to take a look, because it's going to be more reminiscent of what I see in the computer when I'm tweaking my raw file. So, you know, I'm setting the picture control just for the preview, and we know that it doesn't affect the raw files. So, but we know it affects the video. So I'm setting that for video.
Good for you. Although I do notice that we're seeing a little bit of a minor trend, and there is not that I like to use the word generation, but there is a group of photographers that grew up shooting only raw files for a multitude of reasons. And once again, they are relying on the latitude and the ability to over and underexpose and to miss your white balance values and maybe even color saturation values too. And then when they go on their beautiful DSLRs and they push that video button, they're so far off. They're off by a stop on exposure. Or they're off by 500, 600 Kelvin when it comes to color temperature. And boy, if you've ever tried to save video files in a color correcting video suite, boy, that's a lot of work. Jared, do you ever find out that your video is that far off that you're nervous about being able to save it?
No, because I've taken real good care and to not mess it up like I did possibly at the beginning when I started and didn't know. Because video, I didn't grow up shooting video. My first camera that did video was the D3S, and that gave me 5 minutes. But you learn very early on that you have to get it damn close. And with my raw files, I go into when I go in the Lightroom with my still images, you know, I am either pretty darn close or a quarter of a stop. Very rarely is it a half a stop off. At times, depending on the situation I'm shooting, I may try to cheat the system and underexpose to give myself a faster shutter speed when I don't want to push the ISO. Even though the D4 will let you do astronomical things, I still may not want to push it too far, just for the fact that I want to keep it clean. But I don't mind grain, and I don't mind noise personally. There's that whole discussion about noise reduction and noise ninjas and software. I've never used any noise reduction software, because to me it's reminiscent of film. When you're shooting at 10,000 ISO and 12,800 ISO, there's not going to be any color up at that ISO anyway. If you need to shoot in that low light situation, the scene is going to be pretty dark to begin with. So I'm pretty happy with the film grain look. And when your exposure is pretty darn close and you don't have to save it, you know, like you're saying, people are off by a stop or two stops. That's when you start seeing issues. And it's, you know, great. You get a JPEG right in camera and you're within a quarter of a stop. That's great. With the raw file, I mean, the whole point is to get it as close as possible, because it comes back to fundamentals. If you understand your exposures and what you're doing, then you don't have to worry about tweaking way too much. But I'll still shoot raw no matter what.
So I have a question. So we can all agree that you want to get it right in camera. So for shooting, especially for think about consumers like, you know, soccer moms and people that have really busy lives, if they're just shooting and they're getting it right in camera, which is great, then why would they want to shoot raw if they're just they're just shooting on the weekend for fun?
Well, Marlene, you want to take that for me? Why would you bother for weekend stuff if you're just going to shoot snapshots that are going to end up maybe 10 by 10 on your wall? Why would you bother with raw?
Well, I guess you would have to have raw imaging software and be comfortable with it. And some people just want to edit their files in iPicky. I even teach them how to use it. But as far as I'm concerned, though, I like the editing process, but I'm also a purist. I really like to get it good in camera.
Do you think, Marlene, that you would miss that process of converting your RAW files? If somebody took them away from you, say they said you can't shoot RAW files anymore, it's only JPEG, would you miss, like, would you yearn for, oh, I miss my RAW because I have that control and that creative ability?
I would probably miss it, but, you know, if I was still taking pictures, I could live with it, you know?
That a girl, the true photographer right there. Bill, do you ever experiment with RAW, and what do you do for video when you talk about volume guys, or do you yet?
The thing that intrigues me is if you're going to do something that I think actually Giulio on his website has a very good example of, and that's combine video with still photography.
Yeah.
You're probably not going to want to process those RAW files because you're not going to be able to make them look like the video does. You're going to want the camera to do the processing on both the video and the RAW and the still images so that everything matches when you mix it up together in a piece of software.
We have to go from still photo, particularly when we're talking about a video editor, and maybe that still photo is going to move or zoom or something or spin. That color of black is so easy to notice when it's different. When the photo black is different than the video black, it jumps right out at you when you're cutting back and forth between those two. So for me, just so much easier to do that way too. Marlene, let me go back to one thing that you said, and you said that you were altering the sharpness. Are you doing that in camera, or is that something you do in post?
No, I shoot my video at the lowest contrast settings, and I lower the sharpness as well, just as a default, because especially if you're shooting and somebody's like skin tone, somebody got a little shiny spot on their forehead or something, it kind of just dulls that.
Is that a hint, Marlene?
No offense, you know, present company excluded.
Hey, tell me what your system is. Which camera are you using, and then which software does it come into, and then what do you go out with?
For video or stills?
Oh, you use two different cameras?
No, I use the same camera.
Okay.
I'll talk about my stills. I shoot a Canon Mark II, 5D Mark II, and I usually shoot at 100 ISO. I'm kind of a low ISO girl. You know, if I have to go higher, I will. I usually leave it on daylight white balance because I'm so used to what the preview looks like because I shoot RAW that I know. And I'm a fair weather shooter, I admit it. And I use LED lights for my video, and they're daylight balanced, so I just keep the camera on that setting. For my still photos, I take it into Adobe Camera Raw, either through Bridge or through Lightroom. Don't laugh. I like Bridge because I don't have to import anything. I can just find them on my hard drive, and I boom, Command R, open them up in Raw, boom, gone. But in Lightroom, I love the exporting features. I really like that I can export it to exact size I want with my watermark in the corner, and boom and off it goes to Facebook or whatever, because I never leave a photo unwatermarked that's going out into the world.
Giulio, tell me what your system is. So you're going to shoot photo and video, let's say on the same camera. What's going to be your bring-in software? What are you going to use?
Well, I've been using C1 Pro, Capture One Pro for my RAW files. And my video, I've been using Final Cut Pro 10.
Jared, fill me in on your shooting when it comes to hybrid. Say you're going to shoot a gig that's both photo and video, and what if you wanted to export that way? You wanted a collection of photos, say, to go on your website or a client's gallery, and then you wanted to edit together photo plus video to make some sort of hybrid e-product. What would your flow be?
Same flow as it would be in terms of capturing.
Yeah, what would you capture with, and then what software do you use, and do you segment those at any part?
Well, I mean, I have a D4. I have one body. That's what I like to use. If Nikon sends me something, like right now I have a D600 that I have to send back. I mean, I'm going to shoot. My whole mentality when it comes to shooting both is you either shoot one or you shoot the other, and then you finish one, and then you start the other, because if you try to shoot stills and you try to shoot video basically at the same time, you're going to miss both. So if I'm shooting a concert and I'm going to shoot 3 songs, and I have 3 songs to shoot, I'm going to shoot 1 song for video, which that's, first off, you're never going to have just 3 songs to shoot just video if you're doing that. So we'll just say if I've got an hour worth of video time, I'm going to shoot an hour for video, and then I have an hour of shooting time for stills. I'm going to shoot strictly stills. I'm not going to switch back and forth between both. I want an editor who knows what the hell they're doing to go ahead and edit my files, because I'm not great with the software. I am not a...
Are you talking video, buddy? You're going to edit your video files?
Yeah, video files.
Okay, but not your still photo files.
No, my still files are all me. I cannot send those out because that is part of my processing, is part of my style. I boomify things. But when it comes to video, if it's quick video that I'm editing myself, most of the time it's going to be ScreenFlow because it's quick, it's easy. I started to dive into learn Final Cut. but when it comes to real deal big job stuff, I will send it to a guy who's as good as what I do as what he does, you know?
We're spoiled. We've got one of those guys in-house here. My buddy Dave Flores is such a talented guy, and maybe one of the reasons we've been so lucky with some of our video projects is because we've got a guy that has those kind of talents. But I take a different approach than you do. I feel that my creativity, when I'm going to create hybrid products, photo, video, sometimes I don't know which way I'm going to go. If the client does give me enough leeway to cover an event, say a corporate event, that they just say we need to end up with this 45-second or 2-minute piece that's going to end up on a website that describes that event. And those events typically aren't the most exciting events, right? Well, I will alternate between still photo as well as video. And then when I bring those in, depending on what I shoot them with, I'll bring them in. They will first be backed up, and then I'll throw them on my Zenfolio account because I have unlimited storage up there. So all my original video files as well as photo files, before they even get processed, go up to Zenfolio and they sit there. Then I come in through Lightroom, and if it's just a little bit of video, I'll let Lightroom process the video files as well as the still photos. And of course, I'm shooting those kind of jobs is only JPEG. I won't even bother with RAW files. I'll just bring those JPEGs in. If I need to tweak them in Lightroom, I will, but I'm really big on setting my camera the way I want to, and I'll use the custom settings in the cameras to give me 2 or 3 different looks, and I'll just spin between those on whatever hybrid mirrorless camera. I'm big into mirrorless cameras as well as DSLR too. But if I'm going to edit video and photos together to make some sort of product, I love to use the Photodex product called ProShow Web, which is nice, but Final Cut Pro really does such a wonderful job for us to custom make pieces. And then, of course, it goes up to Zenfolio. Client sees it on Zenfolio, whether it's password protected or it's not password protected, and if they want to be able to download those images.
You asked me about the speed of the workflow and RAW files and things like that.
Yeah, there are a lot of people who say it's too slow.
Well, I don't think it's slow at all. I think that the problem a lot of people have is, one, they overshoot. They don't try to capture the moment. They try to spray and pray through everything. And your workflow will go a hell of a lot faster when you're shooting a couple pictures versus shooting 3,000 pictures. When somebody tells me they shot a wedding and they shot 3,000 pictures, I go, how the hell did you do that and not shoot video? I would not shoot 1,000 pictures in a wedding. You're just going to step all over yourself a million times. Get the picture. Know that you're confident that you got the stinking picture. You can look at it on your screen, for God's sake. You don't need to redo the same thing 12 times. I'm done.
Jared, I saw a big-time speaker on the PPA circuit say that he shoots between 3,000 and 5,000 RAW files on a wedding. Pro Bowlers Association? That's his, the PPA, the Professional Photographers.
Oh, PPA, not PBA.
Yeah, not PBA. Nope. That person said that they had 3 people that they had in-house that start the process of the rough edit and then process to a low-end JPEG so that the photographer...
I'll throw a name out there.
I'm not sure it was real or not. No.
So I was just asking. I saw him speak once.
There's no way that business model makes any sense. It's just, it doesn't.
It's called spray and pray mentality, and it's what the wrong... But there's no right or wrong. I need to step back from that. But it's just the mentality that you can hold down the button, and a lot of those mirrorless cameras doing 20 frames a second. You watch the commercial with Taylor Swift, and all she is doing is holding down her Sony's button and going, I just took 8 million pictures. I'm so happy. I'm going to make a heart. And it's just like, give me a break. You're like a young Andy Rooney.
He is. That's great.
What a hoot. Carol, I wanted to thank you so much for joining us tonight. I appreciate all the info that you give us.
You're welcome.
And Giulio, thanks so much for taking some time out of your day there in the sunny Miami. I always appreciate your insight, pal.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And Bill, thanks so much for all that terrific info.
You're welcome.
And Marlene, appreciate all of that too. I learned a lot there too. Thanks.
And I promise I'm going to shoot JPEG this weekend just for Giulio.
There you go.
Jared, I can't thank you enough, man. I loved it. It was so much fun. Will you come back and be on our Hybrid Hangout again?
Only if you bring Ken on. That's my joke I'm ending with. How about that?
We can do that. From the Discover Mirrorless headquarters here in beautiful Chicago, Illinois, go Bears. This is Will Crockett saying thanks for hanging out with us, and there's plenty more information on discovermirrorless.com. Thanks again.